Hi everyone. I wanted to read another snippet from this book about my father, Idries Shah Remembered, that I've edited. I want to read part of a piece written by a very wonderful man named Andersson, who was Swedish and a great family friend and a friend of my father's, and he was my godfather as well. I've called it Inroads into Englishness. Wide-eyed, brimming with fanciful aspirations and eager to mould myself into the archetype of the English gentleman, I arrived in London in the autumn of 1955. I had left Sweden with a romanticized vision of Britain, its aristocratic clubs and impeccable manners, its poets and wonderfully eccentric traditions. I had read Woodhouse and Dickens, had seen films of immaculately dressed leading men strolling through the misty streets of Mayfair, and believed that if I could just immerse myself in this world, I might become embraced into its elegant fabric. After a week or two of putting up in dingy guest houses, I took a modest room in Bloomsbury, a stone's throw from the British Museum, and set about crafting my new identity. I bought myself a tweed three-piece suit, learned to smoke a pipe, and practiced my English idioms. In time, I even took up the habit of reading the Times newspaper cover to cover at a down-at-heel cafe near my lodgings. I would turn the pages with my legs crossed in what I imagined was a properly distinguished fashion. Yet, despite my best efforts, there was something artificial about it all. No matter how hard I tried, I was always an observer, never quite belonging. Not long after these initial inroads into Englishness, I first encountered Idries Shah. I had taken to frequenting a bookshop on Charing Cross Roads, one of those dusty, cramped establishments where the shelves groaned under the weight of forgotten knowledge. It was there one afternoon, while standing in a corner, I was taking notes from a Victorian volume entitled The Complete Etiquette for Gentlemen, when I heard a rather aristocratic voice of a young man behind me. "You'll find more wisdom in the fairy stories than in etiquette manuals," it said. Turning on my heel, I set eyes on a straight-backed figure in his late 20s, dark-haired and intense-eyed. Dressed in an unassuming jacket and tie, his posture was relaxed, as if he carried no weight of self-consciousness. Yet his gaze was sharp, as though he perceived more than what was immediately visible to others. The page I had just read described how an English gentleman could always be recognized by the superior quality of his shoes. Glancing down, I saw at once that he was most certainly one of these rare breeds, for he was sporting the very finest brown brogues which shone like burnished mirrors. The young man extended a hand like a fencer with a foil. "Idries Shah," he said. Doing my best to follow his example, I stepped forwards, dipped my head awkwardly in a bow, and replied, "Andersson, from Sweden." Shah suggested that I replace the volume of Victorian etiquette on the shelf and accompany him out into the street. Without another plan, I did as he was suggesting, and half imagining we had known each other for years, we walked together northwards in the direction of the Tottenham Court Road. Shah was utterly fluid in the ease of communication, as if our meeting was simply the continuation of an ongoing conversation. In hindsight, I replayed that first meeting over and over in my mind, glimpsing at how I had been taken, as it were, under his wing without quite understanding how or why. We turned right onto Museum Street, and I invited Shah to take a cup of coffee with me at the squalid cafe I had frequented until then. As we entered and took a table in the window. I apologized for the sordidness of the place. "You were doing well," said Shah. I asked what he meant. "Well, an English gentleman always does his best to put others at ease," he told me, "and apologizing is one way to do that." We ordered coffee and sat in silence for about 5 minutes, in which I struggled to light my new briar pipe. From his side of the table, Shah appeared to be examining me, but doing so without the need for verbal communication. Then he asked me whether I had travelled. "I've been to Malmo in the south of Sweden," I told him earnestly, "and of course here to London." "Have you ever ventured to Arabia?" he asked. I shook my head and drew anxiously on the pipe. No, never." Shah seemed a little disappointed. He went on to tell me of his recent adventures and of his journey to Mecca as a guest of Saudi Arabia's founder, King Abdulaziz. Through the length of the afternoon, he informed me that his wanderings through Arabia and North Africa, and of earlier travels by ship to Argentina and beyond, had made him who he was. He spoke of hidden libraries in the old city of Cairo, of ancient ceremonies in the Sudan, of cultural links he had collected between Andalusian Spain and Iraq, of the Sufi fraternities he had encountered in Damascus as well. Summoning courage, I asked for the most important thing he had gleaned on his travels. Shah stared distantly off into space. He ordered us both another cup of coffee and stared into space once again. I assumed he had forgotten my question, or that he had decided not to dignify it with an answer, when suddenly he said, "Stories. Stories. Stories." I cocked my head to the side. "Stories?" Shah nodded. "A story is like a house you can enter," he said, "and by entering it, it enters you, and it changes you, even though you don't realize it at the time. The wise have always hidden knowledge in stories and folk tales," he said. I asked why. Idries Shah leaned back on his chair and stretched out his hands. "Because," he said, "if you give people truth directly, they reject it. But if you weave it into a tale, they receive it without resistance, in a way through which it can be harnessed and used." This was unlike anything I had ever heard. After all, in Sweden, wisdom was something solemn, something to be earned through study, discipline, and despair. The idea that it could be hidden in simple, even humorous folktales seemed to me both thrilling and unsettling as well.